Good morning, welcome. Thanks for joining us for Jumpstart's quarterly State of AI webinar. I'm Lauren Smith-Petta, and I serve as Jumpstart's Director of Education. As you know, with the landscape of AI in such a rapidly evolving state, these quarterly sessions are focused on the highlights and headlines of AI, what you need to know in about 30 minutes, and how to successfully and ethically apply these tools to your business today. Jumpstart offers another webinar series on a different topic every month, along with a variety of other educational programs and events. Visit jumpstartinc.org/smallbiz to explore our services. Before I introduce our AI presenter today, a couple of housekeeping items. This presentation session is a mere 30 minutes. The remaining time will be set aside for the Q&A portion with an end time today of 12:15. In your toolbar, you should be able to see an important communication tool at your disposal today, the Q&A. You can put your questions in the Q&A as they occur to you, and Brad will address them when appropriate or save them until the end. At the end of today's session and in a follow-up email, you'll receive a brief survey. We appreciate your feedback. It allows us to continue to bring in top-notch quality experts to teach valuable lessons. All right, without further ado, allow me to introduce our esteemed AI expert, Bradley Reynolds. Bradley is a recognized leader in the AI industry with a deep understanding of the transformative power of large language models, LLMs, and generative AI. As the Senior Vice President of Artificial Intelligence at Expedient, Bradley spearheads efforts to simplify the deployment of private AI for enterprises. So as always, I can promise you, you are learning again from the expert today and are in really good hands. Welcome back, Brad.
Well, thanks a bunch, Lauren. Excited to talk about some of the changes in AI since the last time that we chatted as a group. And I think this one was particularly hard to distill down to a few kind of key areas, but there's some very exciting changes happening that I would say I don't know exactly how they're going to evolve, but they're like things that we should probably all generally be paying attention to. So through the agenda, I want to touch on 4 areas. One, it's kind of like what's at the forefront of AI right now. Forefront meaning not necessarily like research and science, but like things that are going to be available to the general public in the very near term that we should pay attention to. Touching also on kind of how we as humans are finding answers to information and how that might be changing now in terms of just our normal motions. Touching a little bit on something that I thought was exciting in terms of some real-time AI image and video generation. And then the last topic, it's kind of back to school season for the kids, and also thinking about how is AI relating to education? Like how is that, what are people thinking about? And then also kind of how do we think it's going to be employed in the future? So on the forefront side, kind of one of the interesting things, or if not the interesting thing that's going on, is something called Strawberry. So what's Strawberry? OpenAI, so obviously the leader in kind of AI, generative AI model building, is going to be launching a new model. So if you think about ChatGPT is a front end to the actual brain behind it. It's like the chat part of it, but there's a brain behind it. Strawberry is like a different type of brain. And it's really important to think about them as separate because Strawberry is going to be accomplishing certain tasks that the normal model access through ChatGPT, which is GPT-4o, is not built for. And so like, why do they call it Strawberry? And it should be next 2 weeks or so. And if you have a ChatGPT subscription, what I think is happening is you'll have a different kind of model dropdown that you can choose. Well, so I think because ChatGPT has been so successful, most folks think about AI as OpenAI and ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot. But actually, there's a whole bunch of different models out there that have different kind of capabilities. The one that we get excited about is the one that talks to us kind of back in English, but it has weaknesses. And there's one super simple test, which you'll see on the right-hand side, which is how many R's are there in the word strawberry. And it still can't get it right because it's trained on language, not necessarily on kind of more high-level analytic capabilities. And this is like the most simple high-level reasoning capability, which is count the number of letters. Or if you've used ChatGPT and you say, hey, I would like this done, summarize this text in 3 sentences, it seems not to understand what that kind of numeric versus kind of text component is. So there's a whole area of problems, whether that's mathematics, where you'd be like, hey, I want this system to understand the relationships of numbers together with operators. That's not the way our English language works. So there's kind of different training that you need, or I need it to analyze or make analogies or kind of use logic, kind of higher level human thinking than more like text summarization and regurgitation, which is kind of where we're at now. So this is what they promise strawberry to be. And it was named, I think, after this particular problem. And so as we're thinking about it, we look back at some of the OpenAI stuff. So that if everybody remembers, in November of last year, there was this huge tumult at OpenAI. And I put the kind of timeline of Sam Altman getting fired and then rehired and then fired and then the board meeting and then people resigned. It was crazy. We didn't know OpenAI was going to exist anymore, be subsumed by Microsoft or go out of business or whatever. So all that tumult happened in November of last year. And, some of the co-founders forced Sam Altman out and then brought him back. And then one of the co-founders, Ilya Sutskever, left. But why? What was all of this about? Well, they were working on this model, this strawberry, or they called it Q star at that point. And there was real concern internally. And I don't know that this concern is particularly mitigated at this point, that Sam Altman was pushing this reasoning model, this higher level thinking model, and just saying, hey, I get it that it's not completely controlled and governed. Let's push it out to the public. So to Lauren's point earlier of ethical uses of AI, I think there was some real concern that if we push this thing, Q star, or now we call strawberry, out to the public without the appropriate guardrails and protections, that this could create a complete mess and potentially dangerous type issues. So that was the whole kind of construct of all of that drama that happened. And a lot of people have left and kind of gone to competitor companies. Some people have gone to Anthropic to maybe do things with a little bit more guidance and capability. But that was kind of the background to the story. So we're going to see the germination of that out in the marketplace. And from a user or a personal perspective, think about it as like there's going to be sets of problems that need, we'll call it higher level thinking or analysis. Like if you said, hey, help me interpret pro forma at my business or an accounting thing. Well, you need to understand relationships between numbers. You can't, it's not just text in a field that you're kind of regurgitating. So there's like higher level thinking processes that we're likely going to start delegating to Strawberry, where it doesn't fit GPT 4.0. And the reality is businesses or humans, we might be combining them. Hey, when it's very text oriented, we use 4.0. When it's very kind of analysis and logic, then we might use Strawberry and the kind of the combination of those. But so why, kind of why is this so important, or what's driving all of this? Well, OpenAI and other AI companies are on a path. We don't have a vote in what that path is, and the path is concerning to many. And I would say I can see both sides of it, where there's some concern, but also some desire for progress. So they kind of separate this path to AGI, which is artificial general intelligence. So not AI, which is artificial intelligence, but general intelligence, the ability to essentially act like humans or generalize tasks. And so they, in the same way that like Elon Musk wants to go to Mars, a lot of AI companies are like, this is their goal. And so their goal is to get down to level 5, in which, and we'll kind of go through what those pieces are. But the important part here and how it relates to Strawberry, Q-Star, and all of those kind of governance issues is what they're saying is they're ready to jump from step 1 to step 2. We'll have to see how that actually proves out. But that is a movement on a path that, again, we're users. We don't really have votes on. And so I think there's questions that while we're using it, we'll be thinking about what are the implications as these folks are moving down the path. And by moving down the path, hundreds of billions of dollars are being injected into these companies to move down the path. And I think it's a good counterbalance to ask yourself, well, why? What's the purpose? Can we do this in a responsible or more ethical manner? I think there's, I would say, a paucity of checks and balances, at least in the United States right now. Europe maybe a little bit more. And so there's just times to maybe think about it and pause. But level 1 is the thing that we've probably all been using in terms of ChatGPT. So, kind of passing the Turing test, talking to us in human language, being virtual assistant, summarizing things. And, I think a lot of folks have started to build kind of chat bots or this notion of conversing with AI into their workflows. But this is where OpenAI is throwing down the gauntlet and saying, hey, we're going to start actually having reasoning capability. So if level 1 was large language models that understood the relationships of words together, level 2 is more reasoning engines that understand relationships that aren't just semantic, that could be mathematical, or they could be logical, helping to solve more complex problems as kind of like a building block to kind of the next level of AI. And so this is TBD, but if it can accomplish the ability to have levels of reasoning, so like solving all kinds of different math problems that they haven't seen before, then kind of the level 3, which is where a lot of people think the value of AI is starting to take tasks that we do, or sets of tasks, and assigning them to AI agents to go and execute. So a typical example has been for what they call agentic workflow would be, hey, I'm going to go to Switzerland this summer. I need to fly and get to Geneva on this date, and then I'm going to need to rent a car, and then I need you to book these trains, and I need hotels. Essentially, you're telling a whole itinerary that you would normally either do yourself or call a travel agent. Can you have an AI agent be able to hand that off? So like just like a travel agent, except an AI version. The thing is that your accuracy has to be super high. You don't want to end up in Switzerland and find out you got a rental car but no hotel. You also have to know the interdependence of schedules. So, okay, I'm going to leave here and then return a car, and then the train schedule. All of those things are related together. And if you mess up on any of them, the whole kind of house of cards could collapse. So while people are super excited about agentic workflows, and when they look at them in businesses to take like certain processes like accounts payable or accounts receivable or closing the books at the end of the things that we do on a repeated basis, but that need to be super accurate, you need to solve step 2, which is reasoning capability, so that you can take a look and start assigning capabilities to agents, because you need to be certain that they can reason as well or better than a human. Otherwise, the human is going to be superior for certain workflows because of their accuracy. And so, hey, it might take more time, it might cost more, but there's certain situations like closing the books at a company where you're like, little inaccuracies could have huge consequences. And you don't want to arrive in Switzerland and find out you don't have a hotel. So that part that we're at now is kind of a predicate to agency. Past that, it starts to get a little crazy, where you're like, okay, AI is starting to solve new problems or invent things that maybe figuring out stuff in physics that humans have never figured out before. So this starts to go more into the dreaming realm. And then the final level, or what they would consider AGI, is where you can completely automate an organization with, we'll call it AI workers, and have that organization kind of grow. So like this is like these last two, the innovation and organization. Like, yeah, I would love for AI to be able to, come up with innovations of how to treat cancer or like, but then when you get to the point where you're like, I kind of skipped the slide, but you get to the point where you're like, okay, it can take over an entire organization. This is the one that makes you pause and say like, okay, I see OpenAI is on this path. They're saying they've gone from step 1 to step 2. Their natural progress is to be going to AGI in step 5, because why? Like what's the output of this going to be, or what's the benefit to us as humans? And I think a lot of people go to the Terminator one, where it's like, okay, we're just going to kind of completely automate all of these things, and then Skynet takes over, and then essentially eliminates the humans. I don't think it's going to be that. I think it's generally well intentioned, but like the consequences of level 5 are high. I don't know that the consequences of level 2 are high. I think there's like just a lot of upside with it, but we're on a path. And so do we all agree we should be on that path? How should we regulate all that? We're at, I think, a good time to have those conversations and to give those thoughts and to start to introduce the frameworks and guidance, because the train's leaving the station. And so if we don't do it now, they're going to start proceeding towards this kind of level 4, level 5 capability in the next X years, which isn't 50, maybe 5 or something like that. And so it's a kind of a good time to have those discussions. But I don't think we're going to be involved in the Terminator thing, but we should head some of that off. So on a less philosophically complicated thing, I think I wanted to touch on another kind of AI topic in terms of where I'm seeing folks actually getting value right now, and maybe transforming the way that they're currently acting or have acted for the last 20 years. So last 20 years, kind of the way that we find answers to knowledge on the web has been, kind of search and then kind of document return. So I'm seeing folks starting to use AI to kind of transform that, and not just AI, but the data on the back end. So I gave this example in a previous talk about using kind of multi-modal AI to identify things and answer questions. So the notion that I don't just have to ask via text, I can ask via picture. And I actually was just on vacation for a couple of weeks in a foreign country. And so I was using AI a lot to snap pictures of things. I didn't know what they were. And, this would be like, historical things or whatever, answering on the fly or translating language for me on a menu, super, super easy. But essentially just using this kind of multimodal capacity to like get answers. So it wasn't like, hey, the AI was giving me a bunch of stuff to read. It was like answering the question that I had, like in this case. But there's other kind of components of AI now where you can start kind of figuring out how to fix things on the fly. So super simple example, we got some sort of a water dispenser at, like, I don't know, it was a rummage sale or a estate sale or something. And the spigot did not have enough water flow. So basically everybody was standing around waiting for this thing to fill water. So I'm like, okay, I think I need to replace the spigot, but like, I don't know what to get, and I need the water flow. Like, just like help me out. So I could have gone to Google and looked at it, or looked at Amazon, but I kind of went through this process with OpenAI to figure out how I would fix this. So I was like, hey, I just need the higher flow rate. So like gave me the examples, tell me the different types of spigots that I could potentially put in. And then it asked me the question, would you like recommendations? So this is the part that was particularly surprising to me. And just thinking about like how Google monetizes in terms of you search for things, ads pop up, and you might click on a spigot at Amazon based off of Google. But this is like the nascent part where I'm like, okay, is this going to be how they decide to monetize AI in the future? Because it started to show me recommendations. So like, okay, I want a brass spigot or metal spigot or a plastic spigot, and it's telling me here are the brands and here is where you buy them. Doesn't have links yet, but there's no reason that it couldn't have links in the near term. Would those links be paid? I don't know all the answers to that type of stuff. But essentially, the important part, if you're like running a business or working at a business, is like these models are gathering information about your business, and representing them to people searching for things. So this notion of, hey, I'm going to the web and I'm going to find out what the thing is to buy to fix this problem. I don't know if that's going to be the way that people find out answers about your company anymore. And so it's like, I think it now start to become important, like, okay, people are asking ChatGPT about you. What does ChatGPT say? Does it know about you? And then how do you maybe optimize who you are as a company or how you speak about what you do so that as people use these answer engines, they're not search engines anymore, they're actually providing answers, that you're one of the answers for the things that are kind of coming up. And so what's particularly exciting to me is this kind of combination of the answering engine. So in simple parlance, the large language model with data. Now, this is both on the enterprise level, but also on the consumer level. So to give you an example with ChatGPT, which kind of combines the data part with kind of the search evolution part. So simple, who are some top financial advisors in Cleveland? Well, what does OpenAI do? It goes out and searches the web and then provides me the answer. So I could actually click on these things if I wanted to, and there's links now on each of these. But if you're thinking about it, I mean, financial advisor, highly lucrative, very difficult to get customers. You want to be number one, but what are you number one in? You're not number one in the search engine necessarily. You're number one in OpenAI. And where that becomes important is OpenAI distills things out of the search engine. It doesn't necessarily use the same logic of matching that Google would use to rank, this wealth management firm number one. So there's just some things that are evolving of how you attract customers or kind of get eyeballs on on what you're up to as a business that a lot of people are grappling with, marketing agencies, software companies, and just brands. And so I find this super interesting. But the part that is maybe the most interesting beyond the business is like, what is the web now? And to me, the web is just this giant library of information. And instead of us having to go pull 4 library books off the shelf, like in the example of the wealth advisors, like, hey, okay, these are the top 4 Google results. I'm going to go click on each one of them and kind of make my own decision. I now have a librarian that has access to every book ever written, all these websites. But I want the answer. I want to know who the top wealth advisor is in Cleveland. I just want to talk to the librarian and get the answer. I don't want to read 4 books. And so that's the kind of difference. Is now we're getting answers, and we can even kind of have deeper questions. You could say, hey, I need a wealth advisor that specializes in people of this age, or I need a wealth advisor that specializes in people that own, are entrepreneurs or whatever. So you can start distilling it down to something that's more, but essentially you're asking the librarian, and the librarian's telling you of what all of the stuff that they read. So this notion of having huge data archives that you hook into AI so that AI has access to the data, but you don't need to kind of look at it is very interesting in terms of how that's going to evolve, how people find us, how we find information, and essentially the research that we do or do not need to do to get the answers so that we can kind of proceed in business. Give you a quick enterprise example. So, internally at my company, we have a tech support department. So you can ask our AI, hey, how do I install a particular backup agent? Typical technical support question. And you will get a generic answer that is from that vendor, and it will tell you generally how to do it. But if you, like in our system, but you could think about this just like the web, you could say, hey, we're also going to load in our archive of all of our technical solution documents, same way that you would have access to the web. Then if you ask the question, you're going to get the answer that's like, this is the way that we do it, and here's the link to the download, and here's the standard operating procedures and all of that. So this notion of AI by itself is valuable, it can summarize things, but AI kind of hooked into these data stores, and the web being a gigantic data store are going to revolutionize how we get answers to questions, but also questions like, what is the web? Like, are people going to go to libraries anymore? Essentially, is the web going to be relevant, or is it just essentially a bunch of reference material that the AI uses, and we only really interact with AI? Indeterminate. on that, but for me, I just mostly use AI. I don't use Google much anymore. I just use the AI to kind of search on Google. So that's interesting. A couple other areas outside of kind of the, call it the search aspect, is a kind of video games, but also kind of image generation. So this is a smaller item, but something I thought was pretty cool. So there's a video game that came out in the mid 90s that I played when I was little, and it was revolutionary. It's called Doom. And it looks old now, but at that time it was like really cool and revolutionary. And so it's just been in kind of common parlance in terms of any new piece of hardware that comes out. Will it run this particular software, this particular game? And so there is yeah, I'm just showing you kind of the video of what it looks like. You'd be like, okay, this is an interesting video game, and it's just, you know, some old school thing that, you know, nobody plays anymore. But actually, this video that you're watching is being generated in real time by AI. So what they did is they took the game, had AI watch the game. It did not do any type of computer programming. It did not know anything about the code. It just watched the game, and based on the images, intuited what needs to be shown in the next frame. So essentially, it's creating this virtual environment on the fly. And having played the game when I was little, it looks very similar and behaves kind of in physics similarly to the actual video game. So this notion is that we now have AI that is capable, and look, this is still an old school video game. It doesn't look like reality yet. But this notion that you can take reality, train AI on it, and then have AI generate a reality, whether it's a video game or for other purposes. It's interesting because all it needs to know is kind of visual. So if you think about as humans, as we learn our environment and kind of take in information and figure out how to interact with our environment, AI is now showing that, hey, you can feed it a bunch of kind of visuals. And I don't know if they even fed it physics rules, but you know, and it can come back and essentially create a virtual environment similar to what you would do if you were kind of coding it from the ground up. So very, very cool. And then NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang, who's kind of always throwing out prognostications about how AI is going to fix everything, change everything. He throws out big, bold statements a lot, but his thought is that most video games, and video games, thinking about it as more of like a maybe an entree into other things that we could virtualize, would be AI generated within 5 to 10 years. So do you need computer programmers anymore? Or do you need people that are more just, they can specify it via text, and then they can ideate via text, and essentially this video game kind of generates its reality simulation, you know, on the fly. So to me, niche, but kind of super cool in terms of its implications. And then it brought me back to the early 90s. And then small one, but I think really important too, is something I've been thinking about a lot, is kind of how does AI apply to education? So my oldest son took a Python coding course this summer. And you know, they used AI to do debugging when the code didn't work, but the kind of instruction was, hey, you can't use AI to create things. Like you couldn't use English and say, I would like my program to add numbers together or to move the cursor this way. You can't use AI to do that. But once you've written it, you can use AI to say, hey, if it's not working, help me figure out how to debug it. But and so I think that concept in education, whether, you know, kind of in the more elementary or collegiate level, seems to be where everybody's going, which is develop a mastery and assess the mastery first, and then use AI kind of as an assistant. I'm unsure that's where it's going to go, because another Jensen quote, which I probably butcher, I won't get perfect, but that, you know, we're not going to need programmers in 10 years because you can specify pretty much what you need to do in English, and you know, it will kind of output. And kind of if you draw a parallel back to very early programming days, you programmed in kind of like binary. And then there were kind of higher level languages that were compiled down into binary. So like very few people, except for certain circumstances, would ever code in the super kind of complicated machine language anymore. you kind of wonder, is that where it's going to go? And so the notion is like, hey, are we going to look at AI as just a utility like electricity that's always on and say, yeah, like, don't worry about mastering code. Mastering code, great. It doesn't matter anymore. What you need to master is the prompting in English to generate the code, but you don't actually need to know the code. Like if I write computer code right now, I don't need to know how the machine executes it. I just need to know kind of the logic layers of Python. And that seems to be the way that we operate right now in terms of like computer development. But I'm talking about code specifically, but if we look at it in a general sense, if we look at AI as like, we can speak to it in English, it can execute tasks in computer programming or marketing or sales. Like, is it cheating to not have mastery of that? Like, what exactly do we need to have mastery of anymore? Or are we just going to assume like water or electricity, AI is going to be a service that we can have access to and essentially just outsource all of that thing that we might have to had mastery and just be kind of like a general contractor? Don't know how, but I know education is trying to go for, let's make sure the students can master things. I just don't know if that's how it's going to actually evolve when you look at it in, kind of 30 years, but something definitely we're looking at for, thinking about if you have kids in school or, kind of in just a educational state. So, always summarize with this one is this is the worst, most expensive, crappiest AI you're ever going to use. So I'm excited about Strawberry and some of the stuff that's coming down the pike, especially like video generation. I'm excited when that like Sora and all those things get released. But still going kind of leaps and bounds every time. So one little shout out there is, if anybody's interested in getting a little technical, there's an AI and big data meetup next Monday at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History in their new wing. It's a really nice conference area. It's on the 16th, Monday, 5:30 p.m. It's QR code where you can go to the meetup and register free. I think food's included, maybe cash bar. Couple presentations about how companies are using AI kind of in the real world now. And just, kind of a nice little learning spot. And if you need to reach me, that's my contact info. But that kind of finalizes it. And I think we had a few questions.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much, Brad. We do
Sure.
already have some good questions. So Chris asked, given the energy to process AI inquiries, are you concerned that we are using AI when standard search engines will suffice?
Yeah, so definitely. So I work in the data center world beyond AI. And so like power consumption is a big question, power consumption and heat that's generated. So we're always kind of thinking about that. Um, where AI is pushing things is for people to start thinking of alternatives. So like one of the alternatives right now is, small scale nuclear reactors, which is kind of crazy. People are like, they're scared of nuclear, but it's a relatively, there's consequences to it, but it's relatively large supply. And then you just got to kind of get rid of the waste. So yeah, it is a hog, a resource hog. And there's two different types of AI. One type is building these models, huge energy consumption. And then the other is kind of serving them. So when you hit ChatGPT, it's just serving something that's been built last year, which uses maybe 1/100th of the type of kind of energy. So the steady state is smaller, but it's still a lot, and it's more than search. So I do think, well, I don't know if the trade-off is AI to search, kind of Google search, the notion of how much of an energy sink AI or Bitcoin mining is something that we're going to have better solutions for than we do currently, for sure.
Great, thank you. Um, Albert said, I have found ChatGPT to be immensely useful, wonderful tool. On the other hand, I find what I now presume to be level one based online tools that provide support of one kind or another almost useful and very, very frustrating. It basically comes across as I'm blocking you from speaking to a person who can process, incomplete, understand, and thus completely frustrating. The question is essentially, what's the difference?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So like a typical thing that companies are using AI for is, hey, I have to hire 100 support agents. What if I could have 20 agents and then have the robot answer 80%? And so like the problem is that in most circumstances, you want that robot to be one, indistinguishable from a human, two, really accurate. Like you don't want to be sitting there and being like, I'm trying to get the answer about my health insurance and the stupid robot is saying the wrong thing. So, but the companies in rush to get like AI out there and get operational kind of savings are like pushing this robot to in front of humans. And I kind of say, hey, whether it's ChatGPT, OpenAI background or whatever, just assume it's maybe like 80% accurate, even if you plug it into your data. And so like our suggestion to companies is like, look, you can use it to improve efficiency, but use it to improve the efficiency of the human that's interacting with your client, because some of the time it's going to get it wrong, and that human will serve as the kind of arbiter and buffer between them, because you're not there. You're saying you're at level one, and so I think that it's, we would advise every company say don't make this customer facing. It's not accurate enough yet. So I get your frustration. And prior to AI, it was IVR mazes. You could call in and you just like, give me to a human, give me to a human. It's got this whole like rat maze of IVR. Same thing. It's the same people that built the IVRs that are putting the AI in. And I think it's, to me, it's like you got to be thinking about your customer's experience and if they're happy, and you should be engineering to them being happy versus how much money do you save. But, every corporation kind of makes their own decisions on that. So I feel your pain for sure.
Great, thank you, Brad. The last question we have in the Q&A is an ethical question, and Brad always has such interesting answers to these. Don said, great presentation. We may not be headed for a Terminator future, but what about all the jobs that will be lost?
Yeah, so I mean, this is huge, and the kind of question is when, because the definite groundswell is towards starting to automate small aspects of jobs, like the accounts payable aspect, or reconciling the books. So it's not like automating all of accounting, but like different processes. And what's that going to result at in the nearer term? The nearer term, it'll mean like instead of four people in accounting, you might need one person to make sure all of those workflows, and essentially be that arbiter of, hey, we got this 80% right. We need a human to look at it before we kind of give it the thumbs up and say it's 100% accurate. But we have the bots kind of doing a lot of that work. So what happens to those three people? I mean, I know where the business side is going, but they're not necessarily thinking about what do we do? Can we use all those people to do high level work? Can we repurpose them inside of the company? And I think it's a question, and I think that people are going towards kind of operational efficiencies. So I would be concerned if my job was something that seemed to be something that is relatively routine, but does require a human, because the robots can't get it 100% accurate. The robots are getting better and better about getting accurate with stuff like that. So it would be a concern. Like if you're a bookkeeper, if you're a CFO and you're going out and raising money for a company and doing deals, like, and you have accounting background, safer, because very hard for a machine to kind of negotiate debt deals and all that kind of stuff. But if you're like balancing the books every month, something the machine is going to get, especially with like a Strawberry, like an analytic type engine, something that's out there. And so I kind of wonder, I don't have the answer to this, but if you look at an organization and you say, okay, high level stuff, very hard to do, like sales, very hard to do. You got to build emotional rapport and kind of convince deals or be the CEO of a company. And maybe the lowest levels are maybe hard to, but those kind of middle layers of management, like, are those repeatable processes? AI can't really grow humans, so they can't like necessarily train or manage, or, those types of things. But it's, you kind of wonder, is the middle going to get eaten away? And if you look at it as the whole kind of economy, you're like, well, what jobs are safe if some of this stuff gets automated? And to me, a lot of the safe jobs would be the trades. So electrician, plumbing, welding, things like that, carpentry, that if anybody's tried to hire, handyman, it's very difficult right now. I think those jobs become more in demand because you're not going to have a robot that's going to come to your house to fix plumbing. And so I think the prices will go up on those types of services that are very difficult. They're not like routine every time. You have to kind of look at the situation and figure it out. Carpet, all of those kind of trades, which traditionally, and like the US, it's like everybody's been going to college and the trades are kind of like, like they aren't as popular anymore. But I think that they're real A needs, but B skills involved. And so and the other nice thing about the trades is instead of having to go to a 4-year school, you might go for 1 year and learn how to be an expert welder. Hey, you could maybe make $50, $60, $70 an hour in per diem. That's a career. And that's one that the AI is not going. But how do you resolve the middle? I don't know. I don't have an answer to it. But it's going to create pain the way that like a Sam Altman might think about it, the guy that runs OpenAI, is they've been talking about things like called universal basic income, where essentially everyone gets paid some a stipend every month. So think about it as like Social Security for everybody. So in terms of if people get dispossessed and find that their job has been automated, that they have an income that they can survive on. Now, obviously in the US, we're kind of a pretty capitalist country, and that's like more of a, call it a social benefit or a socialist type thing. There's all kinds of objections to it, but that's like when those people think about it, that's kind of one of the spots they go to is universal basic income. I can't say I agree with it, but that's kind of some thought process too.
Great. I think some of us on this call have to start contemplating a career change after that response. So Brad, thank you so much for taking those questions fast and furious. Brad has a plane to catch, so we're going to let him off the hook. Thank you so much for another amazing session. Fortunately, we have Brad one more time before the end of the calendar year. The next State of AI webinar will be Wednesday, November 13th from 11:30 to 12:30. And I'm sure Brad will have even more new gems for all of us then. And then our next general business webinar is called 6 Steps to Sales Success and will be hosted on Wednesday, September 25th at noon. So we hope to see you all there virtually. Thank you again. Thank you again, Brad. Travel safely, and I hope you all have a wonderful week.
Thanks, Lauren.